The cowboy didn't know the river had a name. To him, it was just a thin ribbon of clear water cutting through the red earth, shining under the late afternoon sun like a promise. He had been riding since dawn, dust clinging to his skin, his throat dry, his muscles aching. When he saw the river, he felt relief more than caution. He checked the horizon, empty. No cabins, no camps, no signs warning him away. Just wind, stone, and water. He tied his horse to a cottonwood tree and stepped into the river, sighing as the cold water wrapped around his legs. It was colder than any river he'd known, sharp and clean, almost alive. He splashed his face, washed the dust from his hair, and let the water run over his shoulders. For a moment, the world felt quiet in a way that went deeper than silence, as if the land itself were holding its breath. He didn't notice the riders until his horse snorted nervously. When he turned, Apache warriors stood along the riverbank and the rocks above it, appearing as if the earth had grown eyes. They were calm, unmoving, bows lowered but ready. The cowboy's hand drifted toward his gun out of instinct, but before he could touch it, a deep, steady voice cut through the air. "Do not." An older man rode forward, his posture straight, his presence commanding without effort. His hair was streaked with gray, his face marked by years of sun and decision. He looked not angry but disappointed, as though something long expected had finally arrived. The cowboy straightened slowly, water dripping from his clothes. "Didn't mean no trouble," he said. "Just needed water." The chief studied him for a long moment, then looked at the river itself. "This is not a river for need," he said. "It is a river of promise." The cowboy frowned. "Promise of what?" The chief met his eyes. "By our law, whoever bathes in this water binds himself to my blood." He paused, letting the words settle like stones. "Whoever enters this river will marry my daughter." The cowboy laughed once, sharp and uncertain. Sure, it had to be some kind of test or threat, but no one else laughed. The warriors remained still. The river flowed on, indifferent. When the cowboy looked back at the chief, he understood one thing clearly. This was no joke, and his life had just taken a turn he could not ride away from. The cowboy was not tied or pushed as they led him away from the river, yet he felt more trapped than if ropes had been around his wrists. The Apache warriors moved with quiet purpose, their horses stepping lightly over stone and sand, as if the land itself guided them. He walked beside them, aware of every sound, every breath, his mind racing for a way out that did not involve blood. They reached the camp as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in fire and copper. Smoke rose from cooking fires, and the smell of roasted meat drifted through the air. Children paused in their play to stare at him, curiosity bright in their eyes. Women spoke softly among themselves. No one touched him, yet he felt the weight of judgment pressing in from all sides. The chief sat by the central fire and motioned for the cowboy to stand before him. His voice was calm, measured, carrying the authority of tradition rather than threat. He spoke of the river as if it were a living witness, a sacred gift that had once saved the Apache people when the land had turned against them. In gratitude, a law had been made, one that bound fate to the river's waters, choosing a husband for the chief's daughter, not by force, but by destiny. The cowboy shook his head slowly. He spoke of accidents, of ignorance, of a life already shaped by the trail and the open sky. "I didn't come here looking for a wife," he said, "and I don't believe in laws I never agreed to." The chief listened without anger. "You agreed the moment you stepped into the river," he replied. "Some promises are older than words." As the fire crackled, a movement at its edge drew the cowboy's attention. A woman stepped forward, her presence steady, her expression unreadable. She was dressed simply, yet there was nothing ordinary about the way she carried herself. Her gaze met the cowboy's without hesitation, without fear. This, he realized, was the chief's daughter. She did not rush to speak or look away. She studied him as one might study the weather, weighing what kind of storm or calm he might bring. Then she turned to her father and spoke, her voice firm but respectful. "I will not be given like a trade," she said. "If the river has chosen him, let him stay among us. Let him be seen. I will not marry a man who remains only because he is bound." Silence followed her words, deep and heavy. The chief nodded slowly. The cowboy felt something shift, not freedom, but the opening of a path he hadn't known existed, one that would test more than his will to escape. Morning came softly to the Apache camp, carried on cool air and the smell of sage. The cowboy woke where he had been given a blanket near the edge of the fires, unsure whether he was a guest or a man being measured. No guard stood over him, no weapon was taken from his reach, yet he understood that leaving without permission would stain his name forever. Among these people, the chief's law was not enforced by chains, but by honor. At sunrise, the chief approached him and spoke plainly. He could leave after 3 days if he wished, but until then he would live as they lived. He would work, eat and walk among them, not as a prisoner, but not yet as family. The chief's daughter would watch, and she alone would decide whether the river's choice was worthy. The first day tested his body. He helped gather wood under the sharp sun, his hands roughened further by stone and thorn. Later he rode with hunters who spoke little but noticed everything. When the hunt succeeded, he offered his share without being asked. It did not go unseen. The second day tested his temper. A young warrior challenged him with sharp words, questioning why a stranger should be allowed near the chief's blood. The cowboy could have answered with his fists or his gun, but instead he lowered his eyes and spoke calmly, admitting he had made a mistake and was willing to earn his place or leave in peace. The tension eased, replaced by quiet respect. The chief's daughter observed from a distance. She saw how he listened more than he spoke, how he treated the elders with care, how he never boasted of his strength or his past. In the evenings, she sat near the fire where he could see her but not reach her, testing his patience as much as his intent. On the third day, she finally approached him by the river, the same water that had bound their paths together. The river flowed gently now, as if unaware of the lives it had changed. "You could ride away when the sun sets," she said. "Many men would." He looked at the water, then at her reflection in it. "I've spent my life riding from one place to the next," he said. "Maybe fate finally caught up with me." She studied his face, searching for lies, and found none. In that quiet moment, the test shifted from endurance to truth, and the river listened. The tribe gathered by the river as the sun climbed high, its light scattering across the water in trembling gold. The air felt different now, heavier with meaning. Warriors stood in a wide circle, their faces calm, their weapons lowered. Elders sat on smooth stones, watching in silence. This was not a spectacle, it was a reckoning. The cowboy stood near the water's edge, his hat in his hands, feeling the weight of every mile that had brought him here. He thought of the open trail, the freedom he had guarded so fiercely, and how easily it had slipped from his grasp the moment he stepped into this river. Yet he did not feel trapped. For the first time he felt seen. The chief stepped forward, his voice carrying easily over the sound of flowing water. He spoke of the old vow of survival bought by faith, and of a law meant not to bind, but to protect. He made it clear to all that the river chose only once, and that choice must be honored by truth, not fear. Then he turned to his daughter. She walked forward slowly, her expression steady, her heart visible only in the way she held herself, proud, unbroken and free to decide. She faced the gathered people and spoke clearly. She said she would accept the man the river had chosen only if he stood beside her willingly, not as a captive of custom, but as a partner of equal spirit. The chief nodded and turned to the cowboy. Silence stretched as all eyes fell upon him. He stepped closer to the river, feeling its cool breath rise against his skin. He removed his hat and lowered his head, not in submission, but in respect. "I came here by accident," he said. "I stayed because I was given a choice. No man can ask for more than that." He lifted his gaze to the woman before him. "I choose to stay, not because a law demands it, but because my heart no longer points me elsewhere." A murmur moved through the circle, soft and approving. The chief raised his hand, and the sound faded. He looked at the river one last time, then back at the two standing before him. In his eyes was relief, not triumph. "The river has spoken," he said, "and so have you." As the wind passed through the cottonwoods and the water flowed on, the cowboy understood that some crossings do not take a man away from himself. They lead him home.